Okay, John.
Hello and welcome to Elder Interviews, a program from Creation Spirituality Communities where we explore the lives and experiences of our Creation Spirituality Elders, women and men whose spirits shine with the hard-won wisdom of age. My name is John Robinson, and I am delighted to be your host today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Gail Ransom, who will conduct our interview. Gail is a musician, a writer, a Creation Spirituality minister, and past president of Creation Spirituality Communities. Her life's work has been nurturing spiritual growth, primarily through the arts. She received her D.Min degree in Creation Spirituality in 2010 from Wisdom University and joined the CSC board in 2013. Gail has also co-led a weekly Creation Spirituality-based worship service called the Worship Jam in Pittsburgh, PA for over 12 years. In a moment, Gail will introduce our distinguished guest, Dr. Michael Mansfield, and I know it's going to be great. But before we begin, I should remind our listeners of our format. Our interview will run approximately 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session. So save your questions and comments until we open the floor. We conduct our interviews on the third Thursday of the month, beginning at the same time, 1 Pacific, 3 Eastern. Check the CSC website for future interviews. Our interviews are also recorded and archived for future use for all to enjoy. So with no more ado, here is Dr. Gail Ransom to introduce our distinguished guest.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
I am really glad to introduce Michael Mansfield. What a delightful surprise he was to me for my first week that I ever studied Creation Spirituality with Matthew Fox. Knew nothing about body prayer, though I had done things like he does in some ways before, but here he put it all together, and we were dancing and singing The Ocean Refuses No River, and I was caught, and I ever since have just traveled to be able to be led by him. Michael is a person who makes dancing a spiritual experience, and then when dancing in community, a sacrament. He brings something very special to what we can do together as community, and I'm hoping we can learn something about that today. Michael just entered elderhood by a few months ago, so we decided he was old enough to be our youngest elder interviewee, but he still offers more than 40 years experience leading interactive theater, creative movement, and ritual dance at its intersection with spirituality, sexuality, and social justice. And Michael has taught at the Pacific School of Religion, UC Berkeley, the University of Creation Spirituality, and other Bay Area graduate schools, and travels the country to lead us in community dance in different Creation Spirituality venues. I think he probably has another life, several other lives too, that we don't know about, but we're going to find out soon. So his compassion for the human condition and his regard for community emotion will slowly and gently restore us and our friends and communities to our sweetest and deepest selves. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Gail, thank you. Very awesome sounding introduction. And for all my colleagues who are listening and with us today, thank you for being here too. It's a joy to know that we've all been touched in some way to do this kind of work, and I'm excited to be with you this afternoon. I will take a lead from either Gail or anyone if there's questions. Otherwise, I'm kind of willing to be steered if there's something that you want to definitely get to.
Well, we've prepared some questions for you, and we'll do them first, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the group, Michael. So
Sounds great.
The first one is, who are your ancestors? Who informed you? Who do you feel surrounding you?
Got it. So many levels to that question. I would think of artistic ancestors. I would think of spiritual ancestors. I would think of my own family ancestors. And I think that if I was talking from my family, I'm bringing Irish and German stories with me in that regard. And I guess I can feel the Irish piece of it, perhaps a little more than the German piece. And when I think of spiritual ancestors, I had a really strong mentor teacher in St. Louis University. His name was John Walsh. He was a Jesuit. And I think he was the one who planted many seeds in my heart and my life around theater and dance and spirituality. And if I go out to the bigger imaginative ancestry, I grab people like Walt Disney. I grab people like Catherine Dunham. She's an African-American dance anthropologist who set amazing social justice history back in the 40s and 50s by creating an African-American dance company that were the first to travel around the world and the first to perform. Her ancestry has since created people like Alvin Ailey, and they use her technique and her understanding of dance. But because I was able to study with Catherine Dunham and to tie into her school in East St. Louis, I feel like that has been a huge ancestral dance piece of my history, to know that you can bring together anthropology, dance, and cultural community work.
Oh, thank you. Before we go much farther, I'm going to ask you either kind of lean back or move your microphone, your
screen.
Yeah, we just want to see your face.
Oh, okay.
That's great. Thanks. Okay. So when did you discover you were a dancer? When did that come alive for you?
I believe it was in sophomore year of high school, and I was invited to be in a musical at the high school. And so it was the first time I jumped into the chorus. And so I realized there was something going on in the musical that I was drawn to. But if I really go back, it would be on family vacations back when I was probably 10, 11, 12. And we went to a dude ranch in Wyoming, and every night they had square dancing. And that was my first experience of community dance. Yeah. And from that, I think we would make my parents get us home every night back to the dude ranch to be there for the dance time. And that, I would have to say, is where that seed was really planted. But I didn't get to any formal training until we get to college. And again, this John Walsh, he was the first dance teacher I had. And so to have a Jesuit, he was probably our age group. He was probably 65 plus by the time I met him. And he was teaching dance classes. And so I think that was an amazing moment that I experienced, where age will not determine how we will decide what we're teaching. And he taught until he was probably 75. And I thought that was pretty impressive. I'm only at 60. And I don't know if I'll make 65 or 75, but I'm gunning for it.
Well, so are we. So are we, for sure. So when did you experience yourself, not the spirituality connection? When did that start to come together?
By my senior year of high school, I was at a Jesuit high school in Kansas City, Rockhurst High School. And from that experience, I was around many young Jesuits in formation. So they called them scholastics. They were young people who were training for the priesthood, but they are at that phase of teaching rather than it being ordained. So they've had no theology. But there were probably 8 or 10 young Jesuits around there. And I think that they inspired us immensely. And 7 members of my class of high school, we all joined the Jesuits that year, which was unheard of, 1976. And it was unusual that you would have that many vocations come from a single class at a high school. And I think that jumping into the Jesuits was where I got the first chance to actually explore what it meant to be on a spirit path. In that regard. I wouldn't say I really understood what I was doing for many more years, because I think I went in thinking I was going to be a teacher. And then it only dawned on me later what priesthood meant. And so then it was in that question of what is priesthood that I realized, oh, I'm supposed to be in front of people every day. I'm supposed to be able to say things and talk competently and put ideas together. And then that's where I go, I better study some theater. And so that was my link to the priesthood, to actually help me become a better priest through theater. And at that very same moment that was happening, I was working with John Walsh, and he was saying the only way you can be a good actor or theater person is if you're doing dance. And so you have to do dance too. And so really it was the Jesuits who gave me the interest in dance and theater at the level that I took it to. I wanted to be a grade school teacher. I wanted to be a filmmaker. And the Jesuits weren't keen on either of those at that moment in history. They've changed along the way. But at that moment, they were saying, well, we do high schools, we do colleges, and we do theater, we don't do film. And it was the 1976 focus of where we were. And so I switched, and I really immediately realized I had no interest in being behind a piece of equipment looking through things. I was far more interested in creating community with a group of actors to shape something that we were going to put together live on stage. And then the dance world opened up what's possible when you are bringing your whole body to it.
So you started in the theater, more in the theater than in dance.
I did.
And did you ever become ordained as a priest?
I finished the entire training, and I did not get ordained. So a year before you get ordained, you're asked if you want to be ordained to the diaconate. It's a step on the way to the priesthood in the Catholic Church. And at that point, I wrote the petition to become ordained, and I forgot to turn it in. And that's when I knew something was wrong. And because then after it was late, somebody, the director or whoever the director of my training was, he called and said, are you going to submit your application or your request? And I said, no. And that was the first I knew. So something had changed in my theology training, and I had opened up my questions. I grew up in the Midwest. Questions in the Midwest and in the Catholic Church were very different than questions we were having out in California. And what I would say at a theology center where, and this is probably true for all theology centers, they're probably 10 or 15 years ahead of the regular parish, the regular community, the regular church folks. That could be now not true anymore. But I would say back in 76, the questions that I thought to work in the church, I had to be a priest. And I get to California and I realized precisely the opposite's true. Just to be baptized, you can work for the church or you can do something of the Spirit. And so once I realized that it was not contingent on ordination, and that every other church community doesn't do ordination the way the Catholic community does it, where you are then assigned or placed into churches or to work with communities. There's no choice on the part of the community of who's coming, which then surprised me because I didn't know any better. And then I realized all the other churches are doing this in a very different way. And that made me start questioning kind of everything from the roots down of what we're doing and why we're doing it the way we're doing it. And as soon as you flip from the priesthood of the ordained to the priesthood of all the baptized, and then you go to Matthew Fox and Creation Spirituality, and then you go, everything's priesthood. And so it's quickly, you're out of the concept of what you thought was true.
And when did you run into Matthew Fox? How did you get involved in Creation Spirituality?
So by then I am teaching dance at the Pacific School of Religion, Dance and Spirituality. And there's a friend there who, this is during my theology studies, but I met a woman named Catherine Hartz. And she was studying with Matthew Fox. And it was the year that he was being silenced by the Vatican, 89, 87, 88. I'm forgetting which year that was exactly.
I think 89,
89 is my guess too. And so she was at ICCS, the then version of UCS, but up at Holy Names College. And so she was there. And so she was kind of witnessing that whole process happening in that year while he was silenced. And so when he came out of his silence a year later, so after he honored that year of silence by not speaking for a year, and he went and did studies and talked with famous liberation theology people all over the planet. And when he came back, his first speaking engagement was back at PSR. And so Catherine and I created a dance piece to welcome him back. And that was the first time where I was actually integral and somehow connected with the journey that he was on. And of course, he begins his speech with, well, as I was saying a year ago, before I was so rudely interrupted. And, but the dance piece we had created was a Creation Spirituality dance piece. So that was the beginning. I went to my first, what do you call it? Mass of the Child, Mass of the Inner Child, it was the first one that he had done up at Holy Names College, so probably in the late 80s. And everybody was supposed to bring a stuffed toy and come with a childhood toy or something. So I knew church was going to be different there. And so that predates that. So that's probably the first time where I was in the room with him in a real way. And then before that, I remember when I was in St. Louis, I was working at a church, studying at St. Louis University, and we went to college church there, which is where the St. Louis Jesuit music was all being generated from. Mm-hmm. And so they invited our choir to come to Detroit for the NPM, National Pastoral Musicians Conference. And I was there now I'm probably in my early 20s, early mid-20s. And I walked past this room, and up there on the stage is Matt Fox going on, and he goes, there's so many things wrong with the church. And one of the things is those pews, those damn pews, those dams, they're dams. They block people from doing anything. They're a dam in the church. And they prevent anything from happening. And then he said, and those missalettes, I call them miserableettes, because then you get everybody sticking their face in the program, and it has nothing about looking up and seeing who you're with and who's God and who's there. And I remember those two lines to this day, but that's the first moment he came into consciousness. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to to JSTB, Jesuit School of Theology in Berkeley, then immediately I was confronting his book, Original Blessing.
Uh-huh. But he spoke words that really must have rung true to you through to the core about in the body, seeing who's there, not being in the pews and moving. Had you ever done any kind of body prayer or body mass before that?
So in the same time that I was in that choir in St. Louis, at St. Louis University, I was a dance company to work with the choir. And so that was really my first experience creating an opportunity for a company to come together and to take music and change it into dance. And at that point, the choir was doing not only the Sunday worships, but also concerts. And so then we were able to, in a non-liturgical, non-sacred sense, concert, then it was fine to do dance. Mm-hmm. And it was probably from that I really grew as a choreographer / dance person. But again, my understanding in the Midwest was very different until I get out to California a couple of years later. And then in comes other teachers in my life, Cynthia Winton Henry and Phil Porter and other people that very strongly, Doug Adams, again, PSR's faculty, who were all saying, oh, we can do this way differently. We can create dance and prayer in a whole new form. And so I was very much shaped by the artists I worked with there at PSR.
Well, what have you done outside of religious and theological, spiritual circles? Have you done more musicals? Have you done theater? Is there another place that perhaps was the avenue for all your interest in social justice and sexual justice that you still work on today?
So I would say the Jesuits certainly planted the seed of some of that with the social justice connection, for sure. When I then chose to leave the Jesuits in 1990, I took a 2-year leave of absence from 88 to 90, just before I formally parted ways. But in that I was getting jobs at churches here in the Bay Area as youth minister and working with students on their religious education and preparation for confirmation, preparation for sacraments. And so I was very much working in the liturgical / sacramental ritual range. And it was, I think at that point, that ritual theater really became a strong interest, and connecting ritual theater with our dance history and theater history, which of course go back to rituals. And so once you connect the Greeks and African and other first generation ritual makers all the way through up to today, then that was an exciting way to begin to see the world. I started getting hired by universities, first PSR, and then various junior colleges and other places with math schools all through time here. And so I was teaching theater, acting, and teaching and choreographing and directing musicals and or theater pieces through the college world as well. So I was part-time freelancer. The new word is portfolio artist. You have a portfolio, you get hired, they ask you what you can do, you pull out that thing, I could do this for you. And so, and a freelancer. And so I've always done part-time jobs and always had the ability to be doing different things in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening in a creative way that I always felt really inspired and challenged by. I felt I was using all my skills and interests. So yes to theater, yes to dance. And I took 2 years to go over to London, and I studied in London to get an MFA in acting. And so that certainly solidified some of my training at that point. My undergraduate degree with the Jesuits had been philosophy, English, and theater, and then would eventually go on to do this MFA. I also did the theology degree at the Jesuit School of Theology, and then eventually the doctoral program with UCS. However, I think that my interest is in where the intersection is between ritual dance, ritual drama. Where does it, when you're not sure if you're at church or in a theater, and I would then add now, or a classroom. So that intersection of education, ritual, theology, whatever you want to call it, worship, and theater. I'm intrigued when you create some kind of a theater piece or dance piece and you're not sure what you're seeing. Is it theater? Am I in a theater? Am I in church? Am I in a classroom? That's interesting to me.
So what in that moment, that nexus, they use the word like in one of your bios about the nexus between all of those, touches creation spirituality in a way for you? Or what part of creation spirituality comes alive in that experience, would you say?
Well, I guess first off, I'd say everything is connected. And I would say that there's something about the journey or the process that creation spirituality asks us to take through the four paths, I would say is not unlike the process of an artist or unlike the process of a spirit, mystic person or a teacher, that you enter process. You do not enter a stagnant pool to which you return to. It's something alive and vibrant and changing. I could not have said that till later on. I mean, let's assume 40 plus, where I was able to put some of that together. But to the extent that that's far more interesting to me is to be in a process understanding of what are we doing and how is this all connected and where are we going with it. And so creation spirituality either echoed or affirmed my own instincts that through theater or through dance, that there's something more vibrant happening here, and we have to listen and be much more subtle in our translation of it. And I would say that's the gift that creation spirituality gave me, is the translation possibilities.
Well, so I'm interested in this, when you talked about your instincts, and this is something you put together kind of at the end of your 40 years. So what do you say about your path now, looking back on these years, about your path to that kind of wisdom that you have now, and how you stayed on your path even though you weren't sure, didn't know where it was going, but you definitely, I would imagine, if I can speak for you, experienced it as a path. But how do you see that as it flowers into the wisdom you have now? How do you see, or what advice would you give to your younger self?
Sure.
About coming this way to older age?
now I believe that I would listen more for call
Mhm.
rather than plan.
Mhm.
I think I would be much more aware of, I don't get to really plan this whole deal.
Mhm.
And I can say, oh, I think I want to go in this direction, but that will be shaped and called into a new place. And I believe that it's the calls that have surprised me. So the call in the seminary to no longer be ordained as the way to do the work in the church. So the work in the church was, or the work in spirit was the through line. And then the ordination became, that's not that's not the arbiter of this experience somehow. So a call away to work with the people, a call to work alongside the people, and in some way not set myself apart from ordained ministry. And one of the wonderful things about being asked to wear black shirts with white collars in them is that people treat you differently upon sight.
Mhm.
And so two things would happen. I would walk into a grocery store or something, again, not ordained, but being asked to wear these things as marketing materials, that I would walk into a grocery store or something, and people would look past other people and say, Father, can I help you? And so I knew that there was this instant pedestaling going on where you're automatically giving street cred, you're automatically being treated differently. The other side was peers my age and younger are looking at me and going, you two-faced hypocrite, what the fuck are you doing in this line of work? Why would you don't you see what they're doing too? And then they could just begin the litany of what was wrong with the church.
Mhm.
And so I felt immediately that if I'm going to be pedestaled or damned
Mhm.
before I ever meet anybody, something's wrong.
Mhm.
And so that was the invitation to step aside and say, I want to think about this for 2 years. And then the call was so clear. I was immediately asked to come and work on every religious life community on the planet. No, every religious life community, all the nuns, all of the priests, all the brothers. Many of those communities called me, and I had a friend, Michelle Belto, and she and I created a transformational conference company where we would do the conference design for companies, for these groups.
Mhm.
And so they would say, will you come help us reinvent ourselves? Will you help us change our charism? Actually is what they were asking. Will you help us rediscover our charism and then use it in a new way to meet the needs of the current? So as soon as I left the Society of Jesus as an ordained or as someone on an ordination track, I was immediately called to go exactly into the heart of every other religious life community and help them imagine their futures. That was a rather surprising call.
Yeah.
And so I knew that the call was coming independent of whether or not I was ordained, and that I was doing work that was not contingent on ordination. I suppose that's the big insight, that who you are beats out ordination.
Wow. Well, we're really glad you did that. I'm really grateful that you had that wisdom to listen so well. I'm wondering if you can tell us, are you aware yet of aging and of a difference in the way you look at the world now than when you were, say, in your 20s? And how do you regard the benefits of that, if you find any?
So on February 9th, I had my first back trouble. And so I teach grade school kids in the morning dance. And so I taught 6 classes of kindergartners and first graders. So by the way, accidentally, of course, my dream was to teach grade school, and I've been doing that for 25 years. And so again, the call came, and even though it wasn't the way I thought it was going to happen, now it's happened for 25 years. Anyway, I was teaching 6 sections, and we were running leaps that day. So you run, leap, run, leap. Well, at the 6th class, my back gave out, and I had obviously messed it up. And so I, for the first time, was laid up for 3 weeks with severe leg and hip stuff. That was an aging moment that I realized, okay, Michael, you've got to change your approach to how you're going to work. What you could do in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s even is not going to continue to function or work for you. And I have been adapting my dance teaching all through those years. So all of a sudden I know I can't do any more pirouettes, or I know I can't do any more jazz turns in carpeting because it tears your knees up every time you turn and get caught in the carpet. So, I mean, I've been taking things out, but then leaps went out this year. So I cannot, just be doing that as repetitive jump stress on that same bones. So that's on the physical side. On the other side, when I walk into the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, and 5 people get up and try to give me their seat. That was another shocker. That was another shocker. I had not thought about what that was going to feel like until it happens. And so I'm so honored that they all see me as elder and as a person who deserves a seat. Yay. And yet I don't see myself in that same frame yet. Mm-hmm. But they're teaching me to see myself in that frame. Mm-hmm. And I am aware of that. I no longer do. So I'm married. I've been married with Randy here for, we're on 19 years. And so he has said that I can only do 2 of the 3 time slots in the day now. So I can't work morning, afternoon, and evening. I have to pick only 2 times in the day because obviously working all 3 time slots is problematic at another level, time-wise, energy-wise. Again, it's not working at 60. So I'm very much aware that that has been that side of it's coming. I also am aware that people turn to you now more as mentor than as friend or colleague. They're actually there wanting you to talk to them about experience, advice, wisdom, which it's not, oh, it's really nice to meet you. You want to get together and just chat about it. No, I want to talk with you about this thing, and I want to get your wisdom and ideas on this. And so I see mentor happening much more often. And that's a shift where you can pass as a colleague or as a equal. And now I'm in that role of wisdom person. I work as an advisor at UC Berkeley for 300 dancer and actor students in the theater, dance, and performance studies department there. And so I'm very much aware that I no longer am a cool young person who they can talk with. I am now I'd say grandfather, but father or grandfather who can actually speak from experience and say, if you continue to jump on that concrete that many times, your knees are going to go out. I've had knee surgery on both knees. Your meniscus is going to tear if you jump on that hard surface that many more times. And so I just see the wisdom mentoring role being called out of me much more. Mm-hmm. Is that at the heart of the question still? Or did I?
Yeah, I think so. So okay. What is some of the best advice that felt so good that you have given to a younger person?
At this moment of history, there's a lot of talk about the word microaggressions. And so it's these little tiny insults that we do to each other. And of course, with our politics of the day, we're living in a complete regular diet of it. So anytime people say things and then they say, oh, no, I didn't mean that, or oh, no, that was not my intention, or oh, no. But of course, the damage is done. And they call them microaggressions. So we've been working with the concept of micro-affirmations. And how do you say really upbuilding and helpful and supportive things to every single person you meet? How do you say things to a young 18, 19, 21-year-old so that they can hear that their value is there and they're not being talked down to? And so I have hunted for the last many years to find how can I continue the trash trucks going by. I hope you don't hear it. The many ways that I can say things. This is so great you checked in with me today. and we can talk about this. You are so on it, and you're working so well to get your work done here at UC Berkeley. The way you've split up your courses here and doing all these different areas, it shows that you're really trying to do things in a balanced way. It's just finding ways to say the obvious, but to actually affirm them and give them the idea that they've got wisdom, that they've got good ideas. And so it's like me just pointing out their good ideas to them. If they come in with questions, then it's actually me always asking back something to get a question back to them to say more about what your dream is. And so I often say, as soon as I know what your dream is, then I can get us there and help you get your dream. But until you've got a clarity about what we want to do, and we don't have to know yet, but when you do have a hint, then I can really support that. And I think that's been helpful to folks. So those are the college kids, what working with little grade school kids. They are giving me probably more micro affirmations than anything that they are doing. Just their unending and direct, unconditional love and spirit is the daily gift. I try to feed back to them that what they're doing with their dance or their movements are really great. Let's take that idea and use it. Let's take that idea and turn it into this and build on what they do. So I'm trying to give them a sense that their ideas are valid and valuable.
So that dream that you talked to that student about, what do you believe the dream of your life is?
At first, I wanted to be a grade school teacher. They say that whatever you're doing in junior high is what you're going to do the rest of your life. And when I go back to junior high, so when you're 13, 14, I was running a Saturday morning grade school in my neighborhood, which was very creation centered if I look back on it, because there would be the nature hike part of the class, there would be the arts part of the class, art is med, there would be the somehow skills or things that we were working on, but I was running the school at 13 and 14. And for all of you, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. And worse, I named it Mother's Morning Off. All right. So it was babysitting. It was glorified babysitting. So it was 2 hours, 50 cents, quarter an hour. They dumped their kids off, or I would go around and pick up the kids at the houses and then bring them back. And I was running a school in our house, in the basement or in the downstairs room. Anyway, I look back at that. So that was junior high. And so I feel like I am still doing the exact same thing I was doing in junior high. I'm just doing it with grownups. I'm doing it with little people. I'm doing it with college students. And the fact that I've actually had grade school experience for 25 years teaching dance now as like an artist in the schools for years. So that's a dream. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I didn't mention Alfred Hitchcock or some of the other filmmakers that were so impressive to me, Spielberg, other people that really inspired me. And filmmaking was a goal in my life that got veered away from through theater and dance. And now, for the last 5 years, I've realized, okay, so I live like 2 miles from Pixar. I believe that my next job will be at Pixar. And so I, again, am surprised to find that that thing about film is still right there and is calling me back in another way right now. George Lucas Studios is up the hill a little bit, but the fact that the Bay Area has Pixar and George Lucas, I think there is something there. And so when I can't teach dance anymore, maybe there would be a way to work in one of those studios in some creative form. That is still a dream, I think, that's hanging there. The weirdest other dream was, if I wasn't going to be a teacher, then I thought I'd be a nurse. And the sciences never worked for me in high school that much, so that changed a bit. But again, it backfired, because now I am training actors at UC Berkeley who are training the future doctors and the future dietitians. So I teach the actors to go in and play the symptoms and go in to play why they can't change their diet, why they can't change their exercise habits, why they can't find good food to eat. And so I'm training all these actors to play. And so I'm learning all this medicine to help the actors become the characters to go in to train these young to-be doctors and young to-be dietitians, clinicians. And so again, I've kind of got that nursing thing check out of my way too. Randy and I talk about, so we both were trained in the church teachings. Randy was a Benedictine, I was a Jesuit. And so we asked the question daily, what shall we do for God today? That's kind of our heart question. It's Ignatius as well. But, what shall we do for God today? And so our question will be, what are we going to do with our skills as we move towards whatever retirement will mean? And is there still a leadership place in the church, and what is church, and where would church be? And having just come from a weekend ago with Gail and her amazing worship jam community and the amazing young leadership she's created, I am so, again, inspired. What could be done? I'm still not ready to jump in maybe full time yet. I still go and preach at local churches, UCC churches. And so my finger's in it, but I'm not doing the full time thing anymore. I did that for many years and I'm not there yet. So there's an exciting church being built and I just don't know where it is yet. I'll await the call.
That is a beautiful place to stop right there, isn't that? That's a perfect ending for that part of our conversation. John, you want to take some questions?
Well, yeah, I just want to say that was a beautiful, beautiful interview, Gail. And Michael, your heart is so open. I love that you have found a space of consciousness that is so outside of time and place and context, where you just trust the movement of your own, being. It just makes me happy to see you do that in person and hear you talk about it. I just think it's marvelous. So this is a time now for everybody to get involved. Unmute everyone, Gail. And who's got questions or comments they want to bring up? Be brave.
You all can tell stories too if you want. You can tell a story now.
I have a question.
I found just a quick comment. I just found hearing your micro affirmations and what is your dream to be very helpful as parenting tools as well.
Well, I agree. I totally recommend that. And yeah, it would be nice if the young people got that at home and at school and everywhere. And I think it's different than a self-esteem or a false self-esteem thing. There's a subtle nuance that's different that I think is important to realize and all that.
Have any of you had experiences with Michael that touched you in a way that you want to bring up and share, that what it was like to be in his presence or to be singing and dancing and moving? What do you remember?
Well, I can answer that.
Go for it.
You all were in those groups, and for me to have anybody else who was interested in this was just delightful to me, because it's one thing to have the idea that we could pray together or we could actually do some serious lifting of intention together as a group. You need a group. And so when that many people started showing up at the various incarnations of Creation Spirituality schools, to have a community who were all hungry together and all ready together and all contributing and co-creating together something new. It was an invaluable laboratory / workshop / school for my heart. So I want to thank y'all.
So when did you get us to go into a circle? When was the first time you took us into the circle?
Ever?
Oh, yeah, the dancing circle. When did it?
So that would have, I would have done it at PSR. So I was teaching Matthew's books at PSR. before I got to all the Creation Spirituality, holy names, ICCS, Institute of Culture and Creation Spirituality. And so if we go Creation Spirituality, then it would be at Holy Names, ICCS, and that would have been 94. I started teaching there. And so I was, we started teaching body prayer there. There was a woman who was there ahead of me. What's her name? Sharon Abercrombie. Sharon Abercrombie, I think. So she had been doing it, and she was called away, and so somehow I stepped into some of that there. And then by the time we all got to UCS down in the Oakland Flats, from the Oakland Hills to the Flatlands, then I was involved from the get-go there. I was like the admissions director for all the first classes of both the MA and the D-Min students. I was admissions director. I had to write all the documents with Mary Ford Grabowski, and I were writing all of those documents to found a university. Talk about a surprising role that was. And just for fun, I don't know, a secret of that was Mary Ford Grabowski and I had to go down to San Diego one morning to get our license, because our school had to be licensed to get any kind of funding or credit. And we couldn't become accredited, we only could get licensed. And so UCS, in its first articulations, was licensed. And the schools that I was with that day, besides spirituality schools, were barbershops, trucking companies, and there was one more, hairdressers. Yeah, hairdressers. So there were hairdressers, barbershops, trucking companies, and spirituality schools, all learning how to get a license. Immediately we bonded with Naropa. No, with New College.
Michael, did you ever get involved with the men's movement in the 1990s with the drumming and dance and lion, men's groups?
Yeah, I was in men's groups and worked with that and worked on men's retreats. 97, 98, 99 for sure were the retreats I led. But the men's group, I've been in men's groups, 3 or 4 of them over time, and that's all been a part of it. That is the exciting part, is like, oh my heavens, once you realize, okay, I'm a feminist, so then I tie into the feminist groups. I'm an eco person, so you tie into the environment. I was a Boy Scout, and so Randy and I joined Scouting for All when they were working to get gay identified scouts or scoutmasters able to be a part of that. Was Scouting for All. Now, of course, women are scouts, so they've gone beyond my imagination even. But yes, so every group that came along was part of that story. And I guess that gets back to Gail's question a little bit about the justice. So I think the Jesuits definitely planted that seed of justice. If you're not working on that issue somehow, and if you're not approaching the world through kindness somehow, I don't know how you get up in the morning.
I got a question for you.
Sure, partner.
Okay, I have a grandson that's a dancer at Pace University in New York, and what I'm wondering is, in that environment, what type of relationships are these students forming? Because they seem to be a really close-knit group. When you went to your school, your college of dancing, are you still in touch with some of those people, and did you form connections that you could use further on? And
oh yeah, so I believe that it's a lifelong connection, and that is the case. All of the dance people that I have worked with or performed with over the years, they are still in my address book. They still get Christmas cards. That we're still connected, if not in actually a project, then in something. I think that the bodied work, when you're working together in your bodies, so it's not just an idea, and it's not just on paper and print. If you're fully connected with other community members and working as a community, in full embodied learning or full embodied performance. And if your son's doing that with a professional company or in a school that's headed in that direction, he's building community there that is probably something that would completely challenge any church community's connection.
Yeah, he's my grandson.
Sorry, grandson.
That's okay. Yeah, he's my grandson. But he grew up, just being a dancer. He always was, and very feminine.
Yeah.
And he came out as a gay person in high school, but things are different now. And yeah, he was their homecoming king, so it was worked out, really good for him. But along the way, we grew up Catholic, and he's got a real problem with the Catholic Church. So now his spirituality, as far as being formed in church type environment, is gone. But the stuff he does on the dance is just, it's unbelievable. So.
And I think you could argue that's where spirit is moving right now in his life, and that's not lost. And more than anything, whatever grounding he got, as we know from our deep ecumenism work in creation spirituality, no matter where you stick your hand down into the well, or along the river, it doesn't matter. You're going to pull up God, up spirit. And so if he's doing it through dance and through a community that's telling stories that are either justice-based or beauty-based, just imagine the value that his work is going to have. And we all cycle back to what we did as kids. What did he, and if he was doing that in his 7th and 8th grade, what he's doing. Yeah.
We started out in gymnastics.
Yeah.
And then his body, he does, he does all those exercises every day to keep, limber, and he got a scholarship to Pace University. So
good for him. That's great. And what a gift that a young person can come out in high school. Of course, now we have them coming out in junior high, and we have them coming out in grade school. So as we all grow and we understand more, we'll decide together, I think, that it may not matter as much as we thought.
So I have a question, if I could.
Sure.
I know we have a lot more time. So I really related. I'm actually 74 now, and I have a couple of piano students. And so I am definitely saying to them, don't do it this way. You're going to end up like me, right? With those issues. But what I want to talk about, I don't have a long history. I don't have any kind of history with creation spirituality in terms of being hands-on, face-to-face, just reading.
Well, what about your piano students?
With the piano students and creation spirituality?
Well, you're hands-on with them, quite literally.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Right. But I'm saying in terms of Christian creation spirituality.
Got it.
Reading Matthew Fox's books and so on. But right now, this morning, I had a really first long talk with the local Episcopal priest. And, showing up there for whatever reasons, I'm not sure. But I'm in town having in Southwest Virginia, having a lot of issues around trying to make or help my place become a permaculture garden that is a community resource. And when he asked me about, we began talking a little bit about, creation spirituality, what was it? And he's open to doing a little bit of exploration. So part of the question has to do with if you have any thoughts about what that might look like. Now, I started playing piano when I was 4. I started dancing when I was 5. I did theater. The piano part is the only part that I actually professionalized. I did do some, I did learn organ. I did a little bit of church and so on. So that is actually there. And we talked about that. But he said, spiritual practices, I said, for me here, it's actually pulling grass. It's actually sitting outside with the forest encroaching on me, being present to that. And he's interested in environmentalism. He's interested in how to help people who are not talking to each other be able to talk with each other. And I'm just saying that somehow these are the entries. And I thought you might have some thoughts about what this exploration could look like. You know, what kind of materials, which of Fox's books would be the most helpful that we could explore together in this particular Episcopal church?
Big question.
Well, a tiny bit of the answer.
I think you're go in their doors. So if he likes environmentalism, start with permaculture. If he likes, I forget what the other thing you mentioned was, go in those doors. So go in their doors, build the discussions with those shared interests, and find something that, what you're doing is finding common ground. And so once you've got that common ground, then the ability to say, wow, I'm reading this great book. And I would ask the entire panel here to say, what would you think is the starter book at this point? Because although Original Blessing may be great, I think there's probably things that we could point to now that might be like completely age appropriate for some group, or would be completely permaculture focused appropriate, or whatever the issues, we could probably zero in on that. I'll take advice from my colleagues.
So for the Episcopal priest, I mean, he's just 2 years out of seminary. This is his first job. So he is really very present to the theology. We talked a lot about theologians, you know, that we were familiar with.
Okay.
So that part of it seems to be, I think, also really important in terms of common. It's not with the whole congregation, but with him.
Yeah.
You know, how theologically, what theological validity does it have is something he's interested in.
Well, if it's theological, I would think the coming of the cosmic Christ would be a good one. It's really his whole exploration of the mystic.
And reinvention of work.
Spirituality is all about the mystic.
Right. Reinvention of work would have everybody be able to talk about their own profession and their own job and their own field. And so that whole idea of field, and that was what my thesis was on in Creation Spirituality, was changing the metaphor from a spiritual road or pathway to get into a spiritual field. And so that's a whole nother discussion, but that we've had these various metaphors throughout time of how we talk about our spiritual lives. First, they talked about a spiritual life, and then they talked about a spiritual journey or spiritual path, and spiritual growth. Then we went into spiritual growth for a while, and then we went to spiritual journey or path. And so I proposed, what if we talked about our spiritual field and the value of having a nature metaphor that is so open-ended as a field, and that it brings in our work, our field, and it brings in our faith traditions in the field. And so there was no longer a path you could fall off of. But so I think reinvention of work would be a way to get people who all have jobs or all have lives, and that includes being a mom, that includes being a teacher, you know, whatever their field is, whatever they're putting their passion of their work in. That could be a great starting point too.
All right, that's I already pulled it off the shelf, so I will actually reread it.
Cool. Great question.
Okay.
You also might try, one other one is the Order of the Sacred Earth, which is one of his last ones. Because now at 75, you know, where he's older too, it's kind of a real practical way of putting the mysticism and the sense of community and putting those all together. So you're hitting the ground. I like the field. So you're hitting the ground with it and moving forward. So okay,
great idea. Yeah.
If your priest friend likes any of the people that Matthew's written about, like Eckhart or Thomas Merton or Aquinas, you know, he's written books about those people that would introduce a favorite of his to the underlying theology too.
Well, he was talking more about the Jesus movement people and Marcus Borg and Richard Rohr and those folks.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure how it related to them.
Well, I would put a plug in for Universe Story and our interconnection on the broader level.
That's great.
That's good too.
And Thomas Berry, who is one of Matt's mentors.
Okay.
Good stuff. And it's sort of like what I was talking about with Michael Che at the beginning. It's such a big concept, and it's hard for a lot of people to personalize it. But I think it's once it goes in, there's no going back, and it would fit with permaculture to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it does fit with permaculture. I'm absolutely sure about that.
Yeah, the field. Mm.
Now, Michael, I want to loop back to the question about a particular time when your work was extremely meaningful, and of course, it's been joyful.
Right.
UCS piece of it was joy. That's what I remember. However, in Asheville, what stays with me so profoundly is the animal. Basically taking the Joanna Macy's idea almost and putting it to music, and then we each had pictures of some animal that spoke to us, and then we spoke as that animal in a circle dance. And was so strong and quite wonderful. So thank you for that moment.
You're sure welcome. I really believe that Joanna Macy's insight into how can we become the council of all beings, how can we speak for the animals, is a great insight into how we could pray. I have a green phone. I'm not sure if that means anything.
Somebody wanted to speak? 410-410-224?
They may have parted. I'm not sure. I didn't want to be disconnected.
So what's moving through people? I mean, what are people feeling, and what's stirring inside?
What's stirring inside of me is I realize that as a grandfather, you have wisdom, and it's important to show the younger people, what a grandfather does, so that sometime maybe they'll be a grandparent and they can continue that on. So
that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that had to do with anything, but
it has everything to do with everything.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear you mentioning, or hear Michael mentioning Joanna Macy, because I actually, did do deep ecology with her and Council of All Beings with her and so on. And I'm very interested in those connections, how these different streams are connecting in this.
It's happening. I don't know which conferences contain that discussion right now, except the CSC conferences. And I'm not, those people are all out on the road still talking. I just don't know the names of the conferences.
Okay. Next month.
Yeah, make a conference. We'll come.
Where do you live, Anita?
I live in a place called Abingdon, Virginia, way in the southwest corner, way on the western edge of Virginia, close to West Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina.
Oh, I was
the Appalachian.
There.
I'm looking at Clinch Mountain out my window.
Oh.
There must be Creation Spirituality groups around there, huh, Gail?
Well, that's why I'm asking. It looks to be like there's some in Washington D.C., but and then there's Asheville, of course,
Right, which is 100 some miles. So
yeah, but there's also some Virginia people that are looking for each other. So if you,
I would love to find whoever is here.
All right. Okay, that's you're on. I will do that because they're asking, and that's wonderful. Okay.
Well, I'm filled with gratitude Michael, for your being with us. When you speak and I see your face, it just glows, with your own joy, with your own spirit. You brought so much to this community and to all the communities. I mean, everywhere you go, you just radiate. So I'm just filled with happiness, just being in your presence.
Thanks, John. Thank you all for inviting me. A surprise, and it was a great mentoring moment for me to step into whatever is happening. And true.
Well, thank you. Well, you have so much wisdom in the way you lead us. Body in our bodies, when we move in the circle and then you change it around and you ask us to create something, and you have such wisdom that way. It's been such a pleasure to hear your spoken wisdom. I've really, it's been very full for me. I'm grateful too.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, this might be a time to wind up. That I want to, before we close, I want to mention a couple coming events, just so people can be ready to see them. On November 15th, our Dean Martinelli will be joining us. She earned a DMin degree in 2001 from UCS and has written a marvelous memoir called Listening to My Life. I have read it, and everybody should read it. It is wise and deep and moving, and so don't miss her interview. And then after that, on December 15th, our format will morph into what we've called a wisdom and gift exchange, where everyone is invited to share their gifts of wisdom, writing, photographs, memories, songs, stories, whatever comes out of you, bring it to the gift exchange. That's December 15th. So with all that, we thank you, and I think it's time to close.
Yes.
Thank you all. It's lovely to chat. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank
More
you.
later.
So much.
Thank you.